Cambridge Insider Podcast time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cambridge Insider Podcast. Episode 2 of the two-part series. Let me get that right. Last week we spoke a little bit, not a little bit, really in depth about some new developing policies coming out of China. And really today's episode is focused on how that has, the implications that has for Cambridge, for our partner schools, for our potential students, and for the industry as a whole. So we're excited to chat about this. As always, my co-host, Leanna Glass, how are we doing this afternoon?
I'm great. I'm excited about our two-part series. I think this is our first one, and I really like this. We can kind of carry some thoughts and ideas over and hopefully bring our listeners with us. Kept them hanging on.
Correct. So if you've been waiting with bated breath, the wait is over. Welcome. This is it. Leanna, let's start by giving maybe the listeners a just quick sort of summary of just the policy coming out of China with regards to, tutoring and additional classes and what we discussed last week.
Right. So the Chinese government has issued a new policy that's basically going to put a lot of restrictions around students from age kindergarten to ninth grade, how much extra tutoring they can be receiving outside of school and outside of their normal course load. So this is a big shift in the country in its policies that's really pushing families and students away from putting all of their energy into academic core subjects. And the government really is trying to push the discovery of new skill sets, and it's really going to affect this market a lot. It's a huge market in China. So this is a big shock to have such a big policy coming into play that's really going to affect things.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I know, and I'm gonna kick things off here. But I know last week you did speak, very briefly but quite passionately about why you think this is a good idea, and specifically related to sort of student mental health and that, I suppose, work life or school life balance and just finding some passions and some directions outside of just school. So I will say on the flip side of that coin, for the sake of the podcast, that I do foresee a couple of things coming from this that, might not be as positive as maybe the work life or the school life balance. The first is specifically students are no longer able to access that additional help and really develop specifically language skills that I think were for many years in Southeast Asia specifically looked upon, because that you could do international business and you could go to an international company and an international school and an international university. So are we looking, and maybe just to sort of play devil's advocate, are we looking at less prepared students in the long term?
I think that's a really good point. And this podcast episode could turn into quite the debate, because I feel that students can get language development skills from a plethora of resources, such as watching TV or speaking with a friend from the US or from wherever, an English-speaking country, these language exchange programs. So I don't think that language development needs to necessarily come from hours of tutoring. It can come from a lot of more creative avenues.
I mean, I think it's a very noble idea that we are gonna take kids out of tutoring to allow them to have extra 2 hours of television time. That makes a lot of sense for me as an idea in general. But I will say, and I mean, look, in all seriousness, I do agree with that. I think that's important. I'm thinking specifically in terms of, the industry in the US, from Cambridge's side, from our partners' side. I do think one of the things that we will see happening as you take this tutoring away, maybe in the next couple of years, is that, number one, you're going to get students that maybe are less prepared. They maybe don't have the language skills that we are accustomed to. And I'm certainly not saying they have zero language skills, but I think we might see a decline in the language skills, rightfully or wrongfully so. I think we might also see students coming a little bit earlier because of that fact. So you'll see younger and younger students come to the US specifically because they would have that extra year or two of being able to develop their language skills. So that's something I think for schools and our school partners specifically to look at. Number one, to think to yourself, as a school, am I able to admit younger students? And academically, am I okay with them coming in potentially with a lower level of English? And do I have the resources to be able to develop them? And if you don't, as always, perfect time to talk about Cambridge's tutoring, Cambridge's academic services, which can be such a great plug to your program as a whole and such a great value add to your program as a whole. But two questions specifically for schools that I think they need to seriously consider.
Yeah, I could play devil's advocate all day long, but I do agree for sure that there is the potential, for sure. There's a possibility that students are going to be coming less prepared. And 100%, I think that calls for schools to take a look at their programs, take a look at what resources they're offering to students, and see maybe what needs to be enhanced if students are going to be coming at a younger age. Maybe they're less prepared socially too, and also academically and language level wise. I think another implication of this could be a decrease in foreign involvement in China on the ground. So a lot of tutors and educators in China, if they are foreigners, that's the industry they're getting into. So there might be less opportunity for students to be working with Americans, let's say, who are working in China, who maybe used to be their tutors and helping them face to face or virtual, whatever it was. But there might be a decrease in foreign involvement on the ground in the academic industry.
And then just another reason why we could see students look more and more to the US is because there's no longer those resources of foreigners, people from the UK, Australia, the United States, able to offer those skills to be able to tutor these students. So we might have a considerable amount of families say, I can no longer find that resource in China. What do? I now look at potentially going to the US or abroad to an international destination to study a little bit earlier than I would normally do that. We actually have a colleague, a friend of ours, who did some online tutoring, and because of this policy of late has not been able to continue doing that. So the policy certainly has been enacted, and this is something that's real and it's happening. I did want to add to what you said that maybe we'll see, and this is just really food for thought, but maybe we'll see students who are alongside maybe the language skills which aren't quite there, who are socially maybe not as ready. I want to almost put it the opposite to you, to say that if we are getting students that are not so culturally ingrained into achievement, maybe we'll have a student who can actually fit in better in the American school system, which does focus a lot more on that holistic development. We often, I feel, get kids that are so academically inclined that they struggle. A lot of that culture shock is struggling to get into a culture where school is important, but there are so many other things, extracurriculars, making friends, going to football games, or whatever you have. So that could be an interesting interplay in the next couple of years.
Yes, I agree. I think a huge part of the adjustment when students come over for the first time and start getting involved in school here is like, hold on, I have to focus on more than just my core classes. I have to get involved in sports, or I have to get involved in leadership opportunities, and I have to participate in class. That's a big one too. I need to raise my hand and really use my voice and get to know people. And there's so much more emphasis on this social aspect, not only for your 4 years in high school, but also colleges. I mean, I remember my guidance counselors telling me, like, it's great if you have A's in all your classes, but if that's all you have, colleges aren't going to accept you. They want to see that you're well-rounded. They want to see that you're involved and that you have social skills and leadership skills. And I think that's a huge learning curve for our international students, something that it takes time to come around to. And this policy in China might really catalyze that understanding sooner rather than later, and how long it's been taking for students to really assimilate into that train of thought. And that's why I think it's awesome that we have our Cambridge Care program, which includes virtual events for socialization among our students. It includes a leadership cohort, which gives students leadership certification after about 20 classes of leadership workshops. And we also have a student council, which again offers students a leadership opportunity, but also an opportunity to just network and connect with a lot of other international students and Cambridge Network staff across the country. So I think it's awesome that we have these opportunities for students coming about at the same time as this policy.
Absolutely. And I know that's in part, at least your brainchild, that entire Cambridge Care program. So, kudos to you. We've been receiving incredible feedback about the program as a whole. And I think it's just another great value add that we can offer. So students, schools, anybody, if you're interested to find out more, if this is something that you don't know about, or you're interested to find out a little bit more information, reach out to the podcast team. We'll make sure that Dean in the show notes alongside the article puts all of our details, so you can reach out to us. We can provide more details. Two other things that I did want to mention as part of sort of every episode where we do talk about challenges and new developments in the industry, we want to make sure that we provide some solutions and some ideas for our listeners moving forward. Cambridge Care certainly is a consideration and something that we seriously want our students and even schools and families to consider. We spoke briefly about our academic services, our tutoring program, which is incredible. So both for schools that are thinking I might get a less, a student maybe that has less English development or language development, our academic support and our tutoring certainly is an option for you there and something to seriously consider. To families and potential students that are listening, that are thinking maybe, I desperately want to continue doing this additional tutoring, doing this additional work on my language and potentially a couple other subjects. Our tutoring program, our academic services program is an excellent, excellent resource. So again, if that's something you're interested in, reach out to your Cambridge rep. The final thing that I will say from my side is that for our school partners specifically, I think as this policy affects the whole, the whole of China, you will very likely see more middle class families look to come abroad and study. Families that maybe in the past would not be able to afford it, would not even consider it, they will very likely now be looking at, hey, I cannot receive services in my home country. Are there options for me abroad? However, the challenge for our school partners is these are likely families that have less disposable income, less income to be able to invest in international education. So if this is something as a school partner that you are considering and you're excited because you think we might get more students, which we all hope we will, consider the fact that a big percentage of those families might not be able to afford that regular price point of what we charge for a private high school in America. So a big push from our side has been to reach out to some of our school partners and ask them to seriously consider lowering that price point, coming in at a low cost option, for lack of a better word, to be able to provide solutions for these kids. And in the same, breath, be able to add to your recruitment, be able to add to your diversity as a school. So, if this is something that you're thinking about, consider where your price is and chat to your Cambridge Network representative, chat to the podcast team so that we can guide you a little bit. Because, we can offer all the great solutions. If we're outpriced, we're very likely going to lose out to other countries, Australia, Canada, great options for students when they are looking at low cost options. So schools have really got to come to the party in terms of what they charge. Leanna, I know we can talk about this forever because it's fascinating stuff and there's so much going around, so many implications. Any sort of final ideas from your side as we wrap up the episode today?
Yeah, first thing is just that I think schools should absolutely take advantage of speaking with their program manager or Cambridge Network rep to learn more about the global market, because I know sometimes we don't understand, maybe what the costs of school in Australia is versus here. And it's so helpful to hear those numbers, talk those through, make changes accordingly. But overall, final thoughts are just that I think this policy, initially people thought, from what I'm reading, people thought maybe this won't have deep effects on day-to-day business or life for students in China, but it's turning out that it is, and it's really being enforced. So I'm really interested to see the effects it has over time, and I hope somewhere down the road on the podcast we can talk more about it, and maybe in a year from now see kind of what it has really done in China, what changes it has caused. And I think in the end, the cultural shift that it might be able to influence will end up helping our students coming here. I think it brings China actually as a whole a little bit closer culturally to where we stand in the US with our views on academics and extracurriculars and our ideas of success. I could get very philosophical here, but I won't. But yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes. And it's been really great to talk it through. And I'd be so interested to hear what any of our listeners think about this. So feel free to send us an email, a comment on YouTube. We'd love to interact with you about your thoughts on this.
Absolutely. As always, look for us on all of the podcast platforms on YouTube. We'll make sure that Executive Producer Dean makes it easy to get in touch with us. We'll make sure that the article that we've discussed over a two-part series, the first Cambridge Insider Podcast two-part series. I mean, we're breaking new ground every day. This is phenomenal stuff. To all of our listeners, as always, we appreciate each and every one of you listening. Enjoy the fall season, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Cambridge Insider Podcast. Bye-bye, everybody.